Imagine throwing like the absolute greatest, most expensive, most mind-blowing party in the history of the world.
Oh, yeah, like no expense spared at all.
Right. The guest list is basically a who's who of the European elite. You commission a brandy play, you serve these crazy exotic foods that nobody has ever tasted before, and you end the night with this massive fireworks display that just, lights up the entire sky.
Sounds incredible, honestly.
It does. And you do all of this for one very specific reason, which is to impress your boss.
The classic career move.
Exactly. You want to show him how incredibly competent and loyal and valuable you are. But the result, the very next morning, your boss has you arrested.
Wow.
Yeah. And you spend the next 20 years, literally the rest of your life, in a freezing, isolated prison cell in solitary confinement.
It sounds like some sort of dystopian thriller, right? But it's actually a perfectly documented historical reality.
Which is just insane to me.
It really is. That is exactly what happened to Nicolas Fouquet, who was the finance minister for King Louis XIV of France back in the year 1661.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're peering behind the curtain to examine the invisible, unwritten, and frankly often terrifying mechanics that govern every human interaction.
We're looking at power, and not the kind of power you read about in a physics textbook,
Right, social power.
Exactly. The social dynamics operating right now in your boardroom, in your polite dinner parties, and even in your closest personal relationships.
And we should definitely state our mission clearly right from the outset here.
Yeah, absolutely. We are pulling from this massive stack of historical texts, psychological analyses, and primarily the framework laid out in Robert Greene's book, The 48 Laws of Power.
Which is, let's be honest, it's often viewed as highly controversial material.
Oh, very controversial. But our goal today is not to hand you some sort of villain's playbook. We are not trying to teach you how to become this Machiavellian manipulator twirling a mustache in the shadows.
Right, because if you go out trying to ruin people's lives after listening to this, you've entirely missed the point.
You've completely missed it. Our mission is simply to make you well-informed. The undeniable reality is that these social dynamics, these games of leverage and perception, they are operating around you right now.
Whether you acknowledge them or not.
Exactly. And by understanding the underlying psychology of how power actually operates, you can protect yourself. You can recognize when a colleague or a leader is attempting to manipulate you.
And you can navigate your own life with a much greater sense of agency, which is really the ultimate goal here.
It really is.
So let's go back to that opening story, because it completely shatters this fundamental assumption that most of us have.
Yeah, the assumption about hard work and merit.
Right. I think the natural instinct for anyone entering the workforce or joining a new social circle is to assume that success comes from showing off your absolute best skills.
That's what we're all taught, right?
Exactly. If you want to get promoted, you show the CEO that you are the smartest person in the room. But this Fouquet story suggests that is actually a terrible idea.
It can be a fatal idea career-wise.
So can you walk me through exactly what happened there? Like, what went wrong?
Gladly, because the psychology here is just fascinating. So in the early 1660s, Nicolas Fouquet was this incredibly competent finance minister. He was basically indispensable to the country.
He was the guy keeping the lights on.
Exactly. And he loved the finer things in life. Poetry, art, extravagant architecture. Now, the Prime Minister of France happens to die.
Okay, an opening at the top.
Right. And Fouquet fully expects to be named the successor because, well, on paper, he is undeniably the most qualified man in the country.
Meritocracy, right.
Yeah.
He did the work, so he naturally expects the reward.
That's the logical assumption. But Louis XIV, who is quite a young king at this point, decides to abolish the position of prime minister entirely.
Oh, wow. That's a huge pivot.
It is. So Fouquet gets nervous. He senses the shift in the political winds, and he thinks she might be falling out of favor.
So he panics a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. So he decides to double down on proving his worth. He finishes building his magnificent chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte, and he invites the king to a massive party to celebrate.
But it's not really about the house, is it?
No, not at all. It's a tribute to Louis. It's Fouquet saying, look at what I can do for you.
And this is the party where he just pulls out all the stops.
To say he pulled out all the stops is a massive understatement. He invited the most brilliant nobility in all of Europe. He had Molière, like the greatest playwright of the era, write a brand new play specifically for this single evening.
Just for one night. That's a flex.
And a huge flex. They served a 7-course dinner featuring exotic Oriental foods that literally had never been seen in France before.
Can't even imagine the logistics of that in the 1600s.
It was unparalleled. And he personally toured the king through these geometrically perfect gardens that were so spectacular they actually went on to inspire the Palace of Versailles later on.
Wow, okay.
And then, of course, the massive fireworks display. So Fouquet goes to bed that night thinking, he has secured his position forever. He proved his value.
And the very next morning, the king's head, Musketeer D'Artagnan, right, arrests him.
Yes, D'Artagnan himself.
So why? What is the actual mechanism at play here? If Fouquet threw this incredible party completely in honor of the king, why did the king view it as a crime worthy of solitary confinement?
It all comes down to the psychology of the fragile ego. There is this core concept in the sources: never outshine the master.
Never outshine the master.
Right. Louis XIV was known as the Sun King. He was intensely proud, incredibly arrogant, and he needed to be the absolute, undisputed center of the universe at all times.
So he probably didn't love being a guest at someone else's amazing party.
Exactly. When Fouquet presented these endless spectacles, his intention was to show loyalty. But you have to look at it from Louis's perspective.
Which was what?
The king is sitting there, right? And he's watching his own subjects being totally dazzled by his finance minister.
Every time a duke or an earl complimented the food or the fireworks, they were complimenting Fouquet. They weren't complimenting the king.
Precisely. Each appreciative smile directed at Fouquet felt like this tiny, agonizing dagger to Louis's vanity. It made the king feel that his own court was more charmed by an employee than by the monarch.
That is just deeply insecure.
It is, but it's human nature. The fundamental rule here is that all masters, whether they are absolute monarchs in the 17th century or, middle managers at a modern tech firm, they want to appear more brilliant than they actually are.
They need to feel secure in their superiority.
Yes. So when you display your talents too brightly, you inadvertently poke holes in their vanity. You stir up their deep-seated insecurities.
Let me push back on that a bit, though, because, in a modern context, doesn't a good boss actually want smart employees?
In theory, yes.
Right. Like if I'm a junior data analyst and I give a brilliantly researched presentation that saves the company millions of dollars, shouldn't my manager be thrilled? It makes the whole team look good.
Yeah.
Are we really saying we should just do mediocre work on purpose?
No, we aren't saying do mediocre work at all. You must be highly competent. The danger isn't the work itself.
Okay, then what is it?
The danger is the display of your brilliance relative to your boss. Think of it this way. Fouquet is the guy who accidentally shows up to a wedding wearing a significantly nicer, better tailored suit than the groom.
Oh, man. Yeah, you don't do that.
Exactly. You can be well-dressed, sure, but you cannot upstage the man whose day it is supposed to be. If your brilliant data analysis makes your manager look like they didn't know what was going on in their own department, you have outshone the master.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense. It's about the optics of the brilliance, not the brilliance itself.
Correct. It's how you package it.
But what if you aren't actively trying to show off? Like, what if you are just naturally talented or naturally charismatic? Does that still get you in trouble?
It's actually even more dangerous.
Wait, really?
Oh, absolutely. The sources provide this chilling anecdote about Astor Manfredi, who was the Prince of Faenza in Italy around the year 1500.
Okay, what happened to him?
Well, Manfredi was universally beloved. He was known as the most handsome, naturally charming young prince in all of Italy. He just possessed this incredible natural grace.
Just a universally likable guy.
Exactly. Now, the notoriously cruel Cesare Borgia lays siege to his city. And eventually, the city surrenders.
Which usually doesn't end well with Borgia.
Normally, no. But Borgia initially spares the town, and he tells the 18-year-old Manfredi that he can remain in Borgia's court with complete freedom.
That seems very uncharacteristically generous for Cesare Borgia.
It was a total facade, and it definitely didn't last. A few weeks later, Borgia's soldiers drag Manfredi away to a Roman prison.
Wow, just out of nowhere.
Yep.
And a year after that, Manfredi's body is fished out of the Tiber River with a heavy stone tied around his neck.
Oh my God. Just because he was charming. Did he actually plot against Borgia or something?
Borgia trumped up some fake charge of treason, of course. But historians, and the sources we are analyzing, are very clear on this. The real issue was Borgia's monstrous vanity.
So he was just jealous.
Intensely jealous. Borgia was deeply insecure. Manfredi didn't try to outshine anyone, he just breathed. His mere presence, his natural magnetism, made Borgia seem less attractive and less charismatic by comparison.
He was outshining the master simply by existing in the same room.
Precisely. And he paid for it with his life.
That is incredibly bleak.
Yeah.
I mean, if we have talent or natural charisma and our boss happens to be insecure, which, let's face it, most human beings are, how do we actually survive? Do we just hide our talents forever and pretend to be incompetent?
Not at all. There is a very specific counter-strategy, and it's brilliant. To understand it, we need to look at how Galileo handled his career in the early 1600s. The astronomer. How does he fit into social power dynamics?
So Galileo was in a very precarious position financially. Like most Renaissance scientists, he didn't have, a modern university salary to fall back on.
Right. There were no research grants back then.
Exactly. His livelihood depended entirely on the patronage of great rulers. His old strategy was to invent something, maybe a military compass, and gift it to the Duke of Gonzaga.
Okay.
Then he'd write a book and dedicate it to the Medicis. The rulers would say thank you, maybe give him a gold chain or a small one-time gift, and just send him on his way.
So he was basically just constantly hustling for tips.
It was a life of constant begging. And he realized he needed a totally new approach if he was ever going to secure permanent funding.
So what changed? What was his big pivot?
Well, in 1610, he makes the discovery of a lifetime. He discovers the moons of Jupiter.
A huge scientific breakthrough.
Massive. Now, his old instinct would have been to spread the wealth, right? Give the physical telescope to one patron, dedicate the book about the moons to a different patron.
Trying to get a little bit of money from everybody.
Right. But he doesn't do that this time. He focuses his entire discovery exclusively on the Medici family.
Why the Medici specifically?
Because the Medicis had recently made Jupiter the mightiest of the gods, their official family symbol.
Oh, that is clever.
It was a huge branding exercise for them to link their banking dynasty to ancient Roman divinity. So Galileo doesn't just present a dry scientific finding. He turns his astronomical discovery into this cosmic theatrical event designed entirely to flatter the Medicis.
Wait, how do you even flatter someone with the moon?
He announces that the 4 moons of Jupiter perfectly harmonize with the 4 Medici brothers.
No way!
Yes. He publishes this claim that the moons revolve around Jupiter exactly as the Medici suns revolve around the dynasty's founder, Cosimo V.
That is next-level brown-nosing.
It really is. He literally commissioned an emblem showing Jupiter sitting on a cloud with the 4 stars circling him, and he presented it directly to the current ruler, Cosimo II.
I mean, you have to respect the hustle, but did it actually work?
It worked flawlessly. Cosimo II instantly made Galileo his official court philosopher and mathematician with a full permanent salary. The begging was permanently over.
Wow. Okay, let me make sure I understand the exact mechanism here. Why did this succeed when Fouquet's party failed? Because both men used their immense talents to present a massive gift to their boss.
The distinction is subtle, but it's absolutely critical. Fouquet threw a party that showcased Fouquet's brilliant taste, Fouquet's wealth, and Fouquet's connections.
It challenged the king's supremacy.
Exactly. Galileo, on the other hand, did not challenge the intellectual authority of the Medicis. He didn't make them feel scientifically inferior or insecure.
Right. He made it all about them.
By literally aligning their family name with the stars themselves, he used his brilliance to make the master shine brightly among all the other courts of Italy. He didn't outshine the master. He became the spotlight that illuminated the master.
That is a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah.
If you were smarter than your boss, you have to find a way to make your brilliant ideas look like an echo of their advice. Like, if you solve a massive problem at work, you pitch it by saying, hey, I was thinking about that comment you made last week and it led me to this solution. You mute your own glow to highlight theirs.
Exactly. You provide the actual competence, but you let them take the optics of the brilliance.
All right, so we've established that superiors are highly volatile because of their egos. That covers the people above you. But what about the other side of the proximity equation? What about our friends?
Ah, yes. The people standing right next to us.
Because the sources we're looking at suggest that trusting your closest friends is a massive, dangerous trap. And I have to say, I struggle with this one a bit.
It is deeply counterintuitive, I'll give you that. We are all conditioned to believe that trust is the foundation of any working relationship. And who do you trust more than a friend?
Nobody. Theoretically.
Right. But the historical consensus in these sources is that friends are actually far more likely to betray you than an enemy.
Really? Why?
Because they are easily aroused to envy. And because you already have this informal, casual relationship, they can quickly become spoiled and even tyrannical in a professional setting.
You know, I can actually see that. I had a buddy who hired his college roommate to run marketing for his startup.
How did that go?
Awful. Within 6 months, they weren't even speaking. The roommate was showing up late, ignoring deadlines, and whenever my buddy tried to act like a boss, the roommate would just say, "Come on, man, we used to do keg stands together. Don't pull rank on me."
That is a perfect modern microcosm of the historical danger.
It was a total mess.
Well, the core story the sources provide to illustrate this takes us back to the mid-9th century in the Byzantine Empire.
Okay, setting the scene.
The emperor is a young man named Michael III. He comes to the throne very young, highly inexperienced, and he is completely surrounded by assassins, plotting ministers, and deceitful generals.
A very stressful work environment.
Extremely. He desperately needs an advisor he can trust with his actual life.
So he skips over all the qualified, shady politicians and goes looking for a friend.
Yes. He looks past the entire court, and he chooses his best friend, a man named Basilius.
Who was Basilius?
Basilius was the head of the royal stables. He was a former stable boy of peasant stock who had literally saved Michael's life from a wild horse years earlier.
Oh, wow. So they had a real bond.
They did. Michael loved him. He raised him from total obscurity, sent him to the finest schools, loaded him with gold, and eventually made him the head of the entire army.
That's a huge promotion.
Massive. And Michael's internal logic was very straightforward. He thought, I have given this man absolutely everything he has. His gratitude will guarantee his absolute unquestioning loyalty.
And honestly, that logic makes total sense to me. If someone pulled me out of a stable and made me a millionaire general, I would take a bullet for them. Why does the psychology go wrong here?
Because of a concept known as the burden of gratitude.
The burden of gratitude. Okay, explain that.
When you hire friends, you fundamentally unbalance the relationship. Human beings possess this innate psychological need to feel that they deserve their good fortune based on their own merit.
We want to feel like we earned it.
Exactly. When you bestow a massive favor on a friend, when you just hand them a job or elevate them without them earning it through standard channels, the receipt of that favor can actually become emotionally oppressive.
Really? Oppressive?
Yes, because there is an inherent, unavoidable touch of condescension in charity.
It's the unspoken message of, you are only here because I like you, not because you are actually good enough to be here.
Exactly. And that feeling breeds a secret, simmering resentment. Over time, cognitive dissonance sets in for Basilius. He got used to the wealth. He wanted more power.
He started taking it for granted.
He did. And he felt encumbered by the charity he had received. To protect his own fragile ego, he eventually convinced himself that he had earned his position through his own brilliance and skill, rather than simply through the emperor's favor.
Delusional, but I get how the brain gets there.
Right. The breaking point came when Michael eventually asked Basilius to pay back some borrowed money.
A pretty reasonable request.
Very reasonable. But Basilius refused with an impudent smile.
Wait, he just laughed at the emperor?
He felt he was an equal at that point. And it gets much, much worse.
Oh, no.
Shortly after that refusal, Emperor Michael wakes up in his bedchamber surrounded by soldiers. And Basilius is just standing there.
His best friend.
His best friend. Basilius watches passively as the soldiers stab the emperor to death.
That is brutal.
It is. He then proclaims himself the new emperor, and he rides through the streets of Byzantium, brandishing the severed head of his best friend and benefactor on a pike.
That is absolutely horrific. He murdered the guy who gave him everything just to escape the feeling of owing him.
It's a stark, brutal image, yes, but it deeply underscores the psychological reality. The act of extreme kindness completely unbalanced their dynamic.
So what's the alternative? Do you just never work with anyone?
The sources advise that it is actually far safer to hire a former enemy or a complete stranger.
An enemy? That sounds risky too.
It sounds risky, but an enemy has something to prove. They don't take your favor for granted, and they know they have to work twice as hard to maintain your trust.
Because they know they are on thin ice.
Exactly. All working situations require a kind of professional distance. Friendships inherently obscure the fact that you are there to work, not just to socialize.
Man. So we're building a pretty intense picture here. You can't safely display your true talents to your boss without risking your career. And you can't implicitly trust your closest friends with your livelihood. It feels incredibly isolating.
It is a stark view of the world, certainly.
If you can't be honest with your boss or your friends, how do you safely communicate your goals to anyone?
The harsh answer, according to the sources, is that you don't. You construct a smokescreen.
So we're moving into the realm of concealing intentions, the fog of war.
Exactly. If people do not know what you are truly up to, they cannot prepare a defense against you. It is all about emotional discipline and strict information control.
Let me set the stage with the story of Otto von Bismarck, because I find his level of emotional discipline almost superhuman.
It really is.
So the year is 1850. Bismarck is a 35-year-old deputy in the Prussian parliament. He's a passionate, hardcore patriot. He desperately wants to unify Germany, and he's absolutely convinced that to achieve this, Prussia must go to war against Austria and crush them.
That is his life's defining goal.
Right. It's all he cares about. And conveniently, at this exact moment, the Prussian parliament is fired up for war. The prince is fired up for war. It seems like the perfect time to strike.
But Bismarck is a brilliant calculator. He's not just an ideologue. He senses two critical factors that everyone else is missing.
Which are?
First, despite the enthusiasm, the Prussian military isn't actually ready. If they go to war against Austria right now, they might lose.
Which would ruin everything.
Exactly. And second, the current king and his conservative ministers are terrified of war and desperately want peace. Bismarck knows that if he openly supports a losing war or angers the king, his political career will be over before it even begins.
But his ultimate goal remains power and the eventual destruction of Austria.
Right. So what does a man who dreams of destroying Austria do in this situation?
This is the crazy part. He stands up in Parliament, right at the height of all this war fever, and gives an impassioned, deeply moving speech defending Austria.
Yes.
He talks about the madness of war. He paints these vivid pictures of the ashes of peasant farms. He talks about crippled soldiers. He argues vehemently for peace.
It is a total 180-degree deception. His colleagues are utterly baffled. He's known as this militant patriot, and here he is sounding like a total pacifist.
But his speech is so convincing that several members actually changed their votes. The war is averted.
I just want to pause and ask how someone can lie so blatantly. I mean, how do you stand up and passionately argue against your own core belief without someone seeing through it?
It requires an absolute separation of your inner emotional state from your outward public persona. Bismarck understood that sincerity is just another tool. By appearing deeply sincere about peace, he completely masked his true ambition.
And look at the result. The king, who wanted peace, is so incredibly grateful to Bismarck for taking the heat and speaking up that he elevates Bismarck to a cabinet minister.
And that cabinet position is the foothold he needed.
It was everything. From that position, Bismarck eventually rises to prime minister. He spends the next decade quietly building up the Prussian military, modernizing the army.
Biding his time.
Exactly. And then, years later, when the time is finally right and the army is invincible, he leads the country into the exact war against Austria he had planned all along.
And he crushed them.
He crushed them. He unified Germany. He achieved his life's ambition entirely because he masked his intentions behind a false front of sincerity.
It's the long game played to absolute perfection. Now, the sources offer another example of this kind of misdirection, but instead of grand geopolitics, it's from the gritty American Gilded Age.
Ah, yes, the Yellow Kid.
The story of Joseph Weil the Yellow Kid and a wealthy mark named Sam Giesel. This story blew my mind because it perfectly illustrates how our brains process information and distraction.
Joseph Weil was one of the most creative con artists in history. He had his eye on Sam Giesel, who was a millionaire known to be a very shrewd businessman, always itching for a deal.
Not an easy guy to scam.
Not at all. Weil knew that if he just walked up to Giesel and pitched his actual scam, Giesel's defenses would go up immediately. He was way too smart for a direct approach.
So Weil needed a decoy.
Exactly.
It's exactly like a magician's misdirection. You say, look at the shiny object in my right hand, while your left hand is pickpocketing their watch.
That is precisely the psychological mechanism. It's about cognitive overload. The working memory of the human brain can only hold so much information at once.
So how does he overload Giesel?
Weil approaches Giesel with a highly lucrative but perfectly legal-sounding real estate deal for a hunting lodge in Michigan. The backstory Weil invents is incredibly elaborate.
He builds a whole world around it.
He claims there's a disgruntled secretary selling out his rich bosses, and they need a setup man with cash to flip the property for a massive profit.
And Giesel takes the bait. He gets completely fixated on the details of this real estate deal.
And that fixation is the trap. Weil has deliberately overloaded Giesel's cognitive capacity with the decoy. While Giesel is distracted by the lodge, Weil gently slides him onto a secondary path.
The real scam.
Right. During a meeting, supposedly about the real estate, Weil stages a fake argument with the rich bosses about a boxing match. Weil happens to have a boxer with him, a guy named George Gross.
And the sources note that Gross was middle-aged, wildly out of shape, and clearly not a real prize fighter.
Not at all, but Giesel is so blinded by the real estate smokescreen that he doesn't analyze the boxer at all. He doesn't even question it.
So the staged argument escalates into a massive bet on this fight. Weil's uncle, who's another con artist, fakes a panic attack.
Such good theater.
He says they don't have enough cash to cover the bet, and if they don't cover it, the rich bosses will be insulted and walk away from the real estate deal entirely.
Notice the leverage there. He ties the fake threat directly to the decoy Giesel actually cares about.
Giesel is terrified of losing his massive real estate profit, so he throws in $35,000 of his own cash, which was an absolute fortune back then, just to cover the bet and keep the peace.
Exactly. So they stage the fight in a private gym the next day.
And here is the finale of the trap, which is practically cinematic. During the fight, the opposing boxer hits Gross, the out-of-shape guy. Gross goes down hard. Blood starts spurting from his mouth.
It looks like a fatal blow.
One of the men in the room, posing as a doctor, rushes over, checks his pulse, and dramatically declares him dead.
Total chaos erupts. Everyone starts screaming about the police, murder charges, going to prison.
And Giesel's absolutely terrified. He's a wealthy businessman. The last thing he wants is to be implicated in an underground boxing murder.
Of course not.
So he flees the gym. He runs back to Chicago,
Really?
leaving his $35,000 cash behind in the locked box. He's actually relieved to abandon the money just to escape the murder charge.
Meanwhile, back in the gym, as soon as Giesel is gone, the dead boxer, Gross, just stands up.
It's brilliant. He spits out a little rubber ball filled with chicken blood and hot water that he had hidden in his cheek. The con artist unlocked the box and split Giesel's 35 grand.
It is a masterpiece of manipulation.
But why does the human brain fall for this? I mean, why didn't Giesel just say, wait a minute, this is a setup?
Because our first evolutionary instinct as humans is to trust appearances. Constantly doubting the reality of everything around us would require an immense amount of caloric energy. It would literally exhaust our brains.
So he takes shortcuts.
Exactly. If you dangle an object that someone deeply desires in front of them, their eyes focus narrowly on that decoy. Their critical thinking shuts down regarding the periphery.
They get tunnel vision.
They completely fail to notice the trap you are setting right beside it. You conceal your true intentions by offering a false one that is highly desirable.
Okay, so we can use elaborate decoys to hide our intentions. But the sources also discuss a much simpler, yet highly terrifying smokescreen, which is silence.
Yes, the immense power of saying less than necessary. And to explore this, we return to King Louis XIV.
The Sun King again.
After he matured and consolidated his power, he adopted a legendary catchphrase that he used for almost everything. I shall see.
Let's visualize this because it's almost comical. You have these high-ranking ministers who spend days arguing, preparing massive, detailed policy presentations.
Sweating over every detail.
Right. They would finally get an audience with the king. They would lay out all the options, sweat through their fine silk clothes, and anxiously ask for his decision. And Louis would just look at them with a totally enigmatic expression, say those three words, I shall see, and literally turn around and walk away.
And the ministers would just lose their minds with anxiety. They would never hear another word about the issue until weeks later when the king simply acted on his own.
I would be so incredibly stressed out working for a guy like that. Why are we as human beings so terrified of silence?
Because, as the psychological analysis in the text points out, human beings are interpretation machines.
Meaning what?
We desperately need to know what other people are thinking in order to feel safe. Evolutionarily, if you don't know what the alpha of the tribe is thinking, your survival is at risk.
So we constantly look for clues.
We rely on verbal cues to categorize people. When you hold your tongue, when you consciously say less than necessary, you deny people that categorization. You create a sphinx-like aura of ambiguity.
It's like a blank canvas.
Exactly. And people project their own fears onto a blank canvas. Furthermore, the more you talk, the more common you appear. By sheer statistical probability, the more words you use, the more likely you ought to say something foolish or reveal a weakness.
Silence forces the other person to nervously fill the void.
And in their panicked, babbling attempts to keep the conversation going and figure you out, they end up revealing their own intentions, their own insecurities, and their hidden agendas.
Louis's silence kept everyone below him terrified, off balance, and entirely under his control.
It's a very simple but devastating tool.
We've talked about controlling what you say and the power of not saying anything at all. But if you were using silence and decoys, people are going to start making up their own ideas about you.
Which brings up a critical pivot in our sources.
Right. Once you master the fog of war, you have to actively master the architecture of perception. You have to control what people actually see.
Power isn't merely about the physical actions you take. It's about the theatrical image you construct for the public. Reputation is a literal weapon.
That is the core of Law 5 in the text. So much depends on reputation guarded with your life.
And there is perhaps no better historical illustration of reputation acting as a physical force field than the story of Zhuge Liang during China's War of the Three Kingdoms.
Zhuge Liang was known across the land as the Sleeping Dragon. For years, he had meticulously cultivated a reputation as the cleverest man in China.
He was a trickster, a master tactician who always had a hidden trap.
His enemies believed he could practically see the future. And this carefully built reputation is put to the ultimate test when he finds himself resting in a small, poorly fortified town with only 100 soldiers.
Just 100 men. And suddenly, sentinels rush in with catastrophic news. The enemy general, Sima Yi, is marching on the town with an army of over 150,000 troops.
It is a completely hopeless situation.
Any normal commander in that scenario would do one of two things: surrender immediately to save their lives, or attempt a desperate retreat and be slaughtered.
But Liang doesn't panic. What does he do?
He issues orders that seem like absolute madness. He tells his 100 men to hide out of sight, take down all their military flags, and throw the city gates wide open.
That sounds like an invitation to be massacred.
It does. He then puts on a simple Taoist robe, climbs up to the most visible, exposed part of the city wall, lights some incense, and calmly sits there strumming his lute and chanting.
Okay, so Sima Yi arrives at the head of this massive army. He sees the open gates. He sees his greatest rival sitting alone on the wall, completely defenseless, playing a musical instrument. What is going through the enemy general's head?
Sima Yi's brain just goes into overdrive, paralyzed by Liang's reputation. His soldiers are itching to charge in. It looks like an easy slaughter, but Sima Yi hesitates.
Because he knows Liang's reputation too well.
Right. His internal logic tells him, the gates are open, he's playing a lute, this is way too obvious, he's deliberately taunting me, he wants me to charge in.
So he assumes it's a trap.
He concludes, therefore this must be the deadliest, most elaborate ambush he has ever laid. There must be thousands of men waiting just inside those walls.
Did the thought ever cross his mind that maybe Liang was just desperate and bluffing?
It surely crossed his mind, but his fear of Liang's reputation was so overwhelming that he didn't dare risk his army on that sliver of doubt.
So what did he do?
Sima Yi orders his 150,000 men to turn around and immediately retreat. Not a single arrow is fired.
That is insane. Liang's reputation alone, acting as an invisible shield, defeated a massive army.
That is the ultimate power of appearances.
But how do you get a reputation that strong in the first place? If you are a nobody, how do you start? The sources say you have to court attention at all costs. And this brings us to one of the greatest showmen in history, P.T. Barnum.
Barnum was an absolute master of understanding human attention. He realized a profound truth, which is that the quality of the attention doesn't actually matter.
What matters is that eyes are on you.
Exactly. When he first opened his American Museum in New York, he didn't have a massive advertising budget. He needed a cheap way to pull people in off the street. So he hires a beggar.
And he doesn't give the beggar a sign to hold. He gives him 5 bricks.
Yes, 5 bricks and highly specific, bizarre instructions. The beggar is told to walk a slow circuit of several blocks around the museum. He lays down a brick on the sidewalk at certain points, always keeping 1 brick in his hand.
Just randomly placing bricks.
Right. On the return trip, he swaps the brick in his hand for the brick on the street. He is instructed to remain completely serious, look no one in the eye, and answer absolutely no questions. He just silently, methodically rotates these bricks.
Then what?
Then he enters the museum, walks around, goes out the back door, and repeats the entire circuit.
It's pure behavioral engineering. What happened?
By his 4th circuit, Hundreds of onlookers are swarming him. They are debating what on earth he is doing. Is it a religious ritual? Is it a coded message?
People hate an unsolved mystery.
They do. Every time the beggar enters the museum, people are so consumed by curiosity that they actually buy tickets just to follow him inside and see what the punchline to the mystery is.
That's brilliant.
By the end of the first day, this silent, weird bricklayer had drawn over 1,000 paying customers into Barnum's museum.
And the sources point out that Barnum truly didn't care if people thought he was a joke. He would put a terrible brass band on the balcony of his museum with a massive banner saying, "Free music for the millions."
And the music was awful, right?
Yeah. So incredibly god-awful that people would buy tickets to the museum just to get inside and away from the noise. He would even write fake, anonymous hit pieces about his own shows and send them to the newspapers just to keep his name in print.
Because he understood that in a modern world that is increasingly banal, repetitive, and familiar, anything that cannot be instantly consumed and categorized holds our attention.
Which perfectly transitions into the power of mystery. If Barnum was the master of loud, obnoxious attention, Mata Hari was the master of the mysterious.
Margaretha Zell. She arrives in Paris in 1904 with half a franc in her pocket. She is trying to escape an abusive marriage.
She wants to be a performer, but there are two major problems. She's not considered the most beautiful girl in Paris, and she has literally zero formal dance experience.
None at all.
So how does a broke woman with no skills become the most famous performer in Europe?
She understands the cognitive dissonance of mystery. She knows that the public secretly craves enigmas, so she doesn't present herself as Margaretha from Holland.
She reinvents herself.
She invents a completely new persona, Mata Hari. She starts dancing in private, elite salons wrapped in sheer veils. But the dancing isn't the point.
What is the point?
The story. She tells wild, constantly shifting, contradictory stories about her origins to everyone she meets.
Like what? What kind of stories?
One day, she tells a journalist she's the daughter of a Javanese princess. The next day, she tells a different crowd she learned sacred Hindu dances while riding horseback in Sumatra. Another day, she was raised in an Indian temple.
But didn't journalists call her out on the inconsistencies? I mean, people talk.
Oh, they ate it up. Because her story kept changing, she couldn't be categorized. The human brain, as we discussed, wants to put things in boxes. Mata Hari refused to fit in a box.
So the confusion was actually the product.
Exactly. The public always wanted to know more. They were obsessively trying to solve the puzzle of who she really was. It wasn't about the quality of the dancing. It was about the dense atmosphere of exoticism enveloping her.
She became one of the highest paid performers in Europe simply by refusing to be a known quantity.
And this ties directly into Law 25. Recreate yourself.
The sources offer another example of this, Aurore Dupin, who abandoned her boring provincial life and marriage in the 1830s to move to Paris and become a writer.
Right.
She realized quickly that the literary world was a strict men's club. So she didn't just write under a pseudonym, she forged an entirely new identity. She became George Sand.
She wore men's tailored clothes, smoked cigars in public, and forced the male-dominated establishment to engage with her on her own terms.
She completely seized control of her narrative. But I have to push back here, because this brings up a massive modern debate. Isn't this just lying about who you are?
Well,
We live in an era that prizes authenticity. You know, we're told to bring our authentic selves to work. If you are constantly putting on a mask, inventing stories like Mata Hari, or changing your identity like George Sand, aren't you just a fraud?
it is a very valid modern concern. But the expert analysis in these texts counters the entire modern concept of authenticity.
How so?
The texts argue that the personality you assume you were born with, your supposedly authentic self, is actually largely an illusion. It was shaped by your parents, your peers, and your early environment.
You didn't choose it.
Right. Accepting the default role that society foisted upon you when you were a child is passive. Refusing that role, deciding to mold yourself like clay, is seen as a deeply empowering Promethean act.
So you're saying the mask isn't a lie, it's a creation.
Precisely. You aren't being a fraud. You are becoming the artist of your own identity. The public mask protects your vulnerable inner self while allowing you to command the stage and achieve your goals.
Wow. Okay, let's take stock here. We've built the reputation, we have the aura of mystery, we've recreated our identity to command attention.
The foundation is set.
Right, that gets you in the door, that gets you famous.
Yeah.
But how do you actually achieve massive material success? Because being famous doesn't always mean you are powerful or wealthy. How do you get things done without burning out?
This brings us to the concept of leverage. Law 7 states, get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit.
And the ultimate heartbreaking cautionary tale here is the tragedy of Nikola Tesla.
It really is a tragedy.
Tesla's story is so frustrating to read. He's a brilliant immigrant who goes to work for Thomas Edison in New York. Edison, who has a massive company, promises Tesla a $50,000 bonus if he can completely redesign Edison's primitive, inefficient dynamos.
A huge sum of money.
So Tesla puts his head down. He works 18-hour days for a solid year. He ruins his health. But he achieves it. He completely improves the system.
He did the hard physical and intellectual labor.
Right. And then he goes to Edison to collect his 50 grand. And Edison just laughs at him. He literally says, Tesla, you don't understand our American humor, and completely refuses to pay him.
It perfectly highlights the critical flaw of the pure intellectual. Tesla harbored the naive illusion that science, brilliant work, and sheer intelligence were immune to human politics.
You thought the work would speak for itself.
He wanted to do all the hard work himself. But doing the heavy lifting yourself is a quick path to exploitation and exhaustion.
And the tragic part is, he never learned the lesson. It kept happening to him. Later, he invents the alternating current system, the literal foundation of modern electricity. He takes it to George Westinghouse.
Another businessman.
Right. Westinghouse funds it, but when financial pressure hits the company, Westinghouse talks Tesla into tearing up his royalty contracts and accepting a tiny buyout for his patents that were worth untold millions.
He gave away his leverage.
Completely.
Yeah.
Later still, Tesla laid all the theoretical groundwork for the invention of the radio. But Guglielmo Marconi used Tesla's patents, broadcast the first signal, and legally and historically took all the credit. Tesla died in poverty in a hotel room.
Now, compare Tesla to Edison. Edison was not a great scientific thinker. He wasn't a mathematical genius.
No, was he?
No, he even admitted he didn't need to be a mathematician because he could always just hire one. Edison was a businessman and a strategist. He spotted trends, he hired geniuses like Tesla to do the exhausting 18-hour-a-day labor, and then he slapped his own name on the patents.
It sounds incredibly ruthless.
It is ruthless, but it is the reality of leverage. The lesson the sources extract is that credit for a creation is often more important politically and financially than the creation itself.
The real skill of power is spotting the brilliance of others.
Yes, spotting them, utilizing their legwork, and presenting the final product as a result of your own godlike efficiency.
Okay, but if you're going to leverage people and navigate these intense political environments, you are inevitably going to run into disagreements. How do you handle conflict without making enemies?
You follow Law 9. Win through actions, never through argument.
I love this one because arguing feels so completely futile. I compare this to modern internet culture. Have you ever, in the history of social media, actually changed someone's deep-seated opinion by arguing with them in a comment section?
Never. It has a 0% success rate.
Exactly. They just dig their heels in deeper. Why is that?
Because arguing triggers people's insecurities and their pride. When you argue with someone, especially a superior, you are essentially telling them they are wrong, which implies they are stupid.
And nobody likes feeling stupid.
Right. Even if you win the argument with perfect logic, it is a Pyrrhic victory. The resentment you stir up by wounding their pride lasts far longer than any momentary change of opinion.
The sources show how Michelangelo understood this perfectly in the 1500s. He was carving the legendary statue of David. The mayor of Florence, a man named Soderini, was the patron paying for the statue.
A very important guy to keep happy.
Exactly. Soderini comes into the studio to look at the massive work in progress. He looks up at the face and complains that David's nose is too big.
Now, Michelangelo knows the nose is geometrically perfect. The problem is an optical illusion because Soderini is standing right underneath the scaffolding, looking straight up.
Michelangelo could have argued with him. He could have pulled out diagrams, lectured the mayor on perspective, geometry, and Renaissance art theory. He could have proven he was right.
But he doesn't. He knows that lecturing the mayor would embarrass him, so Michelangelo secretly grabs a handful of marble dust from the floor.
Just a handful of dust.
Yes. He climbs up the scaffolding to the face of the statue. He pretends to tap his chisel against the nose without actually altering the stone at all. And as he does, he subtly lets the marble dust fall from his hand. He then calls down to Soderini and asks him to look again.
Soderini says, "Ah, much better. You've brought it to life."
Michelangelo won without uttering a single offensive word. By demonstrating his point physically, even though it was a complete trick, he allowed Soderini to feel like his authority was respected and his artistic eye was validated.
He agreed with the mayor on the surface, but achieved his own goal, preserving the perfect nose in reality.
The mechanism is simple. Demonstrate, do not explicate. Words are cheap and offensive. Actions are undeniable and face-saving.
All right, so demonstration works brilliantly for managing an individual's ego, like a mayor or a boss. But what if you need to deeply influence or even mobilize large masses of people? How do you scale this manipulation?
This is where the analysis becomes intensely psychological. We enter the dark arts of influence.
It's dark arts.
Law 33 states, discover each man's thumbscrew. The premise is that no one is perfectly secure. Every single person has a gap in their castle wall.
A weakness.
Exactly. It is usually a deep insecurity, an uncontrollable emotion, or a secret pleasure.
And how do you find this thumbscrew? It's not like people wear their deepest insecurities on their sleeves.
You have to become a careful observer of human behavior. The sources suggest two primary methods. First, look for childhood needs that were unmet.
Like what?
If someone was ignored as a child, their thumbscrew is an insatiable need for validation. Second, look at how a person acts in public and assume they secretly desire the exact opposite in their private life.
The public persona is often an overcompensation to hide the weakness. So if a guy is a loud, aggressively domineering bully in the office, he likely craves submission or gentle validation behind closed doors.
Precisely. Or consider politicians who build their entire platform on rigid, puritanical family values. Historically, they are often the ones hiding the most scandalous private lives. The extreme outward behavior points directly to the internal void.
Once you find that gap, what do you do with it?
It becomes a lever you can pull. People's need for validation or security is the easiest thumbscrew to exploit. If you can fill that emotional void, if you can provide the specific praise or comfort they desperately lack, they will become entirely dependent on you.
They won't even care that they're being played.
They often won't even realize it because you are providing relief for their deepest psychological pain.
Which scales up terrifyingly well.
Yeah.
If you can find the collective thumbscrew of a massive group of people, you move into Law 27. Play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following.
This is a devastatingly effective playbook.
This section of the text blew my mind because it literally breaks down the science of charlatanism into a 5-step playbook. Let's walk through the steps. Step 1, keep it vague but full of promise.
Right. If you are too specific with your claims, people can easily fact-check you and prove you wrong. You want to use words of great resonance but low actual meaning words like transformation, awakening, or paradigm shift.
Because the followers will project their own specific desires onto your vague words.
Exactly. Step 2. Emphasize the visual and sensual over the intellectual.
Why the visual?
You have to ward off skepticism. If people have time to think, they will find the holes in your logic. Boredom kills a following. So you use theater, visual splendor, loud music, emotional testimonials. These distract the critical, rational faculties of the brain.
Make it a spectacle. Step 3, borrow the forms of organized religion. You can't just be a guy with an idea. You have to be a guru, a visionary.
You create rituals. You establish a hierarchy of titles for your inner circle. You demand sacrifices, whether it's time, money, or cutting off ties with non-believers. This elevates your movement from a mere organization to a sacred crusade.
Step 4 is crucial for the grift. Disguise your source of income.
You cannot look like you are just taking your followers' money. You have to surround yourself with extreme luxury private jets, mansions, and claim that this wealth is the natural, inevitable result of your belief system working.
The message is, follow my methods, and the universe will make you rich like me.
Precisely. And finally, step 5. Set up an us versus them dynamic.
You have to unify your followers against a shadowy outside enemy. It could be the government, the medical establishment, the matrix, or just non-believers.
Creating an external threat creates an impenetrable bubble of in-group loyalty. If anyone attacks you, you just tell your followers, see, the enemy is trying to silence the truth.
I read these 5 steps, and I look at the modern landscape, and it is genuinely terrifying how common this is. I'm thinking about extreme wellness gurus selling unregulated miracle supplements, crypto bros promising financial salvation outside the banking system.
They all use it.
Even tech startup founders creating literal religions around their corporate culture, demanding 80-hour work weeks to change the world. They are running this exact 19th century playbook verbatim.
They are hacking human nature. When traditional institutions, governments, churches, communities fail to provide meaning or security, people feel a profound void. They will flock to any charismatic individual who confidently offers a simple mirage in the distance to cure their complex anxiety.
Okay, let's bring this to the end game. We've built the foundation, you have the followers, you have the unshakable public image, you've found the leverage on your enemies, and you've perfectly masked your true intentions. How do you execute the final decisive move?
The sources offer two final critical laws for the endgame. The first deals with the energy of execution. Law 28, enter action with boldness.
Why is boldness so important? What's wrong with being careful?
Timidity is incredibly dangerous because it exposes doubt. If you attempt a maneuver or pitch an idea with half a heart, you invite resistance. People sense hesitation like blood in the water.
It creates obstacles.
Boldness, on the other hand, gives you massive presence. Even if you make a mistake, a bold mistake can be covered up by even more audacity. It forces everyone else to stop planning and simply react to you.
The story of Pietro Aretino is the absolute wildest example of boldness here. The setting is Rome, 1514. Aretino is a lowly scullion, basically a nobody, a dishwasher.
Bottom of the social ladder.
Right. He wants desperately to be a famous writer and a man of influence, but he has no money and no status. Now, the Pope at the time has a beloved pet elephant named Hanno.
A gift from the King of Portugal.
The elephant gets sick. The Pope's doctors panic and give the elephant a massive 500-pound gold-laced purgative. Not surprisingly, the elephant dies. The Pope is utterly devastated.
And Aretino sees an opening. An opportunity for absolute audacity.
He writes a fake last will and testament for this dead elephant. But it isn't a sweet memorial. It's highly satirical and viciously targeted.
He writes that the elephant is bequeathing its specific body parts to the most powerful cardinals in Rome, specifically choosing parts that mock their widely known, but rarely spoken of, hidden vices.
For example, he leaves the elephant's massive reproductive anatomy to a cardinal who was famous for his lechery in affairs.
It is incredibly risky. He is a peasant publicly mocking the most powerful, dangerous men in the Catholic Church. They could have had him tortured and killed without a second thought.
But it's so bold and so incredibly funny that the pamphlet sweeps through Rome like wildfire. Everyone rushes to find out who had the sheer nerve to write it.
Even the Pope, despite his grief, is highly amused by the audacity of it. Instead of being executed, Aretino is brought to the papal court, given a high-paying job, and eventually earns the terrifying title, Scourge of Princes.
Kings paid him off just so he wouldn't write about them.
His boldness entirely obliterated the gap between his low status and his high ambitions. He acted like a man who had nothing to lose, and therefore he gained everything.
But there is a dark side to boldness, isn't there? Boldness without calculation is just recklessness. Which brings us to the final, sobering lesson of our deep dive. Law 29, plan all the way to the end. I want to talk about Vasco Núñez de Balboa.
Balboa is the perfect counterpoint to Aretino. Balboa was incredibly bold. He escapes his creditors in Spain by hiding in a provision chest on a ship heading to the New World.
Like literally hiding in a barrel.
Yes, he gets to Panama, takes over a colony through sheer charisma and force, and then hacks his way through the deadly, malaria-infested jungles. Against all odds, he becomes the first European to discover the Pacific Ocean and claim it for the Spanish crown. He's aiming for the mythical gold of El Dorado.
He achieved massive glory. He won.
He won the middle of the story. But he only thought about the immediate victory of discovery. He failed entirely to plan for the political fallout of his actions.
Oh, what's happening back home?
While he was out exploring the jungles, the enemies he had made when he aggressively took over the colony were back in the Spanish court. They were constantly whispering in the king's ear, painting Balboa as a usurper, a traitor who was building his own empire.
Because he didn't plan his political endgame. He left his flank exposed.
Exactly. A new governor was sent from Spain to replace him. Balboa, thinking he was a hero, walked right into a trap. He was arrested, put on a show trial for treason, and beheaded.
He got seduced by the emotional high of the middle of his story.
The ending is everything. People are too often seduced by the rush of a temporary victory or by wishful thinking about how things will play out. The sources forcefully argue that you must calculate every possible obstacle, anticipate the envy of your rivals, and know exactly when to stop.
You cannot rely on fortune. You must gently guide fortune by thinking steps ahead of everyone else.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's tie all of this together. We have covered a massive amount of psychological ground today. We've looked at the fragile egos of masters and the dangers of outshining them. We've explored the resentful trap of hiring friends.
We've seen how smoke screens, decoys, and silence mask our intentions.
We've unpacked the power of mystery, the psychology of cults, the necessity of boldness, and the requirement of planning to the very bitter end.
If we synthesize all these disparate historical sources, the overarching unifying theme is that power itself is not inherently evil. Power is an entirely amoral game.
It's just a tool.
It is a game of appearances, of emotional control, and of strategic distance. Whether it's controlling your words like Louis XIV, masking your geopolitical intentions like Bismarck, or finding the psychological leverage in a rival, these rules govern the reality of human nature. They operate entirely divorced from our wishful, comfortable thinking of how the world should operate.
And that leads me to a final thought for you, the listener. You might be listening to all of this, the deception, the thumbscrews, the engineered cult followings, the silence, and thinking, I don't want any part of this. This is cynical. I don't want to play these manipulative games.
It is a completely natural human reaction to want to opt out of the muddy waters entirely and retreat to a simpler moral clarity.
But consider this. By refusing to understand the rules of the game, are you truly taking the moral high ground? Or are you simply volunteering to be the pawn on someone else's chessboard? When you step back into your office tomorrow, into that landscape where the rules are unwritten and the true motives are hidden, well, if you choose to remain blind to how the shadows move, you don't actually stop the game from happening.
The game is going to be played regardless.
Exactly. You just guarantee that you won't see the trap until it's already sprung. So, does true freedom require understanding the very power dynamics you so desperately wish to avoid? Something to mull over. We'll see you next time.